To go back to the sports angle, one person that really sticks out because of everything you just said, he put in his speech at Benedictine College, and that was Harrison Butker. And they are really making a push here. Like, yes, does it help his celebrity that he's part of the Patrick Mahomes-led Kansas City Chiefs? No doubt, of course. But when you see him go on Fox News, when you see him with Josh Hawley, are they searching for that person to fill John Wayne's shoes, to become their, celebrity prop to try and widen their cause?
Oh, I think so, very much, right? They're again looking for a celebrity that embodies this kind of, uh, uh, retrograde masculinity, if you will, kind of embodiment of these right-wing politics. Josh Hawley writes a whole book on manhood,
That's right.
but he doesn't quite embody it in the same way. And so bring along his buddy, and that is a better look. At least apparently, in their calculations. Kansas City Chiefs also, right, an interesting history in terms of ownership and links to right-wing politics.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a fascinating history there. I'm not sure that anybody's explored that yet. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of a way to appeal to certainly a younger generation and the kind of branding that they want for their movement.
I assume you saw his speech at Benedictine College, correct?
Yes. Yes.
What was your reaction?
Oh, entirely normal if you follow men inside these spaces. Women belong in the home, and men are called to lead. Patriarchy, again, that is God's law, and it's only in following that law that you are going to achieve prosperity and success individually and as a nation. So it was kind of funny for me as a historian who studies this movement to see every once in a while, like this will kind of like break out into the wider public, right? So people will get a
Yes.
glimpse and they'll be shocked and they'll be horror. And I can't actually believe that people say these things. And then, for me, it's that's nothing. I mean, that is the norm inside these conservative Christian spaces.
However, with that being said, my simple follow-up is this: were you pleased with we look, we are not you, we don't follow this, as pardon the pun, religiously as you do. Were you pleased with the reaction that many folks had when that speech went viral?
Um, yeah, that's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about how I felt. Ambivalent,
Hmm.
I will say. Because when something like that sparks outrage, on the one hand, I'm glad that people see what is, when we can pull back the curtain a little bit and people can see, what that is. But I think that the nature of social media outrage uh, often tends to not be particularly thoughtful and to be in some ways an overreaction. So that then, when people are just shocked at what he said, ends up getting interpreted inside conservative Christian spaces as, see, they, disrespect women who choose to stay home, see how, cruel they are and how they, denigrate our values. And it ends up actually playing into the hands of folks on the right who like to depict, the left as out of touch and as ultimately just disrespectful of their values. And this really drives this culture war mentality and drives radicalism on the right, right? This actually plays into their hands. So I was ambivalent with the response. On one hand, it kind of struck me as funny, like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely nothing new. Yes, this is what they say all the time, and much worse inside these spaces. And then on the other hand, I'm not sure that that's an effective way to diffuse some of those more radical positions, and again plays into the hands of folks on the right, fits into their narrative.
Right, fair point. I suppose this could be educational then, because the studies have shown that when someone has an extreme position and they are widely condemned, and in a way, I'm not saying, what he said wasn't disrespectful. Anybody can certainly go about their business in responding any way they can. But when it gets to that point, there's more of a reaction to dig their heels in and get even more defensive. So what would be the correct reaction if someone were to disagree with that?
Oh, it's almost impossible to come up with it. This is why we're in the situation we are, right? Because
Fair.
I suppose ideally, it would be great if a lot of people said, wow, I hear what you're saying, and there's a lot of good in this, and it's a lot of women would enjoy staying home and raising kids, and it would be great if our economy was structured in a way that better benefited parents,
Yes.
women as well as men, right? There's a lot that you could do there. And then, what might this look like? But, that's putting a lot of responsibility on, the left or, anybody outside this space when in fact people on the right are not interested in those conversations. Like they really aren't. And they are trying to drive this wedge between the right and everybody else, and they thrive on this sense of embattlement, and they're really not looking for kind of a plan to benefit families writ large. And what would that look like? Paid time off, and what would that look like? Extending maternity leaves? No, they actually want all women to follow this model. They want they don't want a social safety net. They
Mm-hmm.
don't, right? So there are some really core disagreements. Um, so it's difficult to know how to respond. I still think that there could be people who could be picked off, or certainly the conversations along the lines of, yeah, these can be good things too. How could we work together to build a society that is good for families? It sounds naive, but it probably is better than just the kind of pile on that we usually see.
This is hopefully my last question about Harrison Butker. So when we took in his speech, obviously many folks very upset. Obviously goes without saying, I did not like it. What did you make of their reaction to trying, at least in my eyes, an attempt to downplay it and say, no, 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 we didn't mean all women. We just meant if you want to be able to be a homemaker. What did you make of how they tried to frame it publicly afterwards?
Fairly disingenuous, and particularly, as a historian, we care a lot about context. And so, the context right now that we are living in is one with an ascendant Christian nationalism. And so within the Christian nationalist spaces, and Christian nationalism, we're talking about the current iteration really of the Christian right, stretches back decades. They actually do want to restructure society along their understanding of God's laws, along patriarchal family structure, patriarchal heterosexual family structure. Theirs is not, it's fair to say, a pluralist vision for America. And many within the Christian nationalist movement understand constitutional rights within a framework of God's law, right? They will argue that no, that America was founded as a Christian nation. Some will even go so far as to say the founding documents were directly inspired by God. Therefore, what that means is that the Constitution cannot possibly secure rights that do not align with God's law, right? So then you have to see, well, how do they interpret God's law in terms of gender, in terms of patriarchy, in terms of anti-LGBTQ, in terms of a whole host of issues? They will have an answer on everything, including on the economy, by the way. Right? They have an understanding of what God's law actually is, and so the Constitution can only protect their version of it. And so, yes, a little bit disingenuous there. I have to say, I did love the Benedictine sisters' response
Yes.
to that speech, and I think that's very important for other religious traditions and other figures representing those traditions to weigh in regularly, because right now in the media, there is a tendency to conflate Christian with conservative, right-wing evangelical men and white men. And that is, I mean, if you look at statistics, they are not, they do not represent the majority of American Christians even. And so we have to kind of recalibrate, and it plays into the hands of the Christian right when we just say, oh, they represent the Christian view. That's exactly what they want. So that anybody who is attacking them or any of the positions that they hold can be kind of held up as they hate Christians, when in fact there are millions of American Christians who are deeply opposed to this conservative and radical social vision.
Mm-hmm. That's great memory, by the way. Shout out to the sisters. They also went very old school by putting out a statement on Facebook. So I had to log in to see their statement.